Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. I'm recording this video on June 3, 2020. Earlier today at about 12:30 a.m., my channel hit 300,000 subscribers. It was late February 2020 when I had reached 200,000, so I was really amazed to have added 100,000 in 102 days. It's really difficult to express how grateful I am for this. It's very encouraging. It's incredibly satisfying to know that my content is connecting with so many people, and I hope it's helpful to many people as well. For this 300,000 subscriber video, I thought I would do something a little different. I've had a number of requests for a review of my favorite movies. I think this question has come up even more lately because of the coronavirus lockdown. So people are thinking, are there any movies out there that I should watch? Well, I have a few thoughts. Even though my taste in movies has been referred to as horrifying and unimaginable at times, I think you'll find this video to be interesting. Movies are actually a pretty interesting subject for me in general. I'm a big fan of film. I don't really watch much television, at least I haven't in the last 10 years or so, but I always try to make time to watch movies. Just like anyone who likes film, it's hard to choose my favorites. Each movie brings something different, a different type of value. And sometimes it's quite difficult to compare the value of one film to that of another, right? I just sit here sometimes and think, I can't make this decision. But here I have come up with 5 films that I think really do represent my favorites. Also, just like with music, movie preferences are highly subject to nostalgia. As I mentioned in the video where I talked about nostalgia, it affects me just like it would affect many other people. It's definitely part of how I developed preferences for certain movies. So this is a good time to issue a spoiler alert for any movie that I mention in this video. I'll list the movies in the description in case anybody wants to look at that first before watching the video. My most recent film was released in 2015, so spoilers may not be a problem for many of these. The oldest was released in 1992. I want to start by listing a few movies that technically didn't make the top 5, but I really liked them, so I wanted to mention them. So the ones that didn't quite make it: Top Gun, Godfather Part 2, Die Hard, Back to the Future, and the movie Troy. I know that the movie critics will largely disagree with probably all of these choices except for The Godfather Part 2. I really did think all of these were good movies, and I made a separate video about Troy that I'll put on Patreon. In that video, I connect the character Achilles, played by Brad Pitt, with the construct of narcissism. So now moving to the 5 films that actually did technically make the cut here. So number 5 is the movie Love Actually, released in 2003. It's a romantic comedy directed by Richard Curtis, and it stars a lot of actors and actresses that I like. Bill Nighy, Hugh Grant, Colin Firth, Laura Linney, Liam Neeson, Alan Rickman, and Emma Thompson. This movie follows an ensemble cast in the weeks leading up to Christmas in London. What do I like about this movie? It has an authentic and thoughtful feel to it. Each of the 10 stories that are featured in the film are interesting in different ways. All the characters are interconnected with the exception of Billy, the singer, and his manager Joe. Even though Billy is disconnected, the other characters are influenced him because they see him on television and hear him on the radio. The movie has a positive message that contains a number of moments that were humorous, frustrating, sad, and hopeful, and I like that not all the stories resolve in a positive way. It has kind of a realistic feel in that sense, although other parts of the movie are quite unrealistic. Moving to number 4 on my list, this is The Martian, released in 2015. It's a science fiction directed by Ridley Scott, and it stars Matt Damon as the astronaut Mark Watney. Even though this movie features a severe windstorm on Mars, which wouldn't happen there due to the low air density, it did get quite a bit of the science correct. And I really like the way it emphasized the importance of resilience and logical thought. Mark Watney is alone on the planet Mars, abandoned because he was thought to be dead, yet he remains productive. I think for most people, the mental health toll of this experience would be unbearable. The isolation at that level, the constant threat of death, the enormous pressure to perform these complex tasks. It wasn't about just staying alive. It was about completing this work necessary to realize the rescue. He needed to work to save his own life. There are probably people with extremely low neuroticism that could have survived under these conditions like we see in the movie, but not many. I think this would have had a deleterious effect that was unsustainable for most people. Another thing I liked about this film is how it did not provide a clear answer about the best route to save Mark. The debate was between using that rocket to resupply the Hermes or sending supplies directly to Mars and then sending a spacecraft later on to rescue Mark. Most movies would just have a plot that says, look, this one path is correct and every other path is incorrect. But with this movie, they really stayed with the uncertainty. We don't know what would have happened if they had gone another route. He might have survived that way as well. So it really tapped into how we don't always really know how things will turn out. We just pick a path and we hope for the best. Of course, we choose it based on logic, but it's not always clear which one makes sense. Moving to movie number 3, this is Unforgiven, the 1992 Western starring Clint Eastwood, and it was directed by him as well. It won Best Picture that year. Unforgiven follows the story of an outlaw named William Money, who comes out of retirement to kill 2 men who attacked a prostitute. He partners with his friend, Ned Logan, played by Morgan Freeman, and a character called the Schofield Kid. They travel to Big Whiskey, Wyoming, whose sheriff, Little Bill, played by Gene Hackman, is determined to protect the assailants. This film features realistic combat. It was not seamless or precise as featured in a movie like The Quick and the Dead, which of course also starred Gene Hackman. This film is really about how some people cannot obtain redemption, as indicated by the title. Sometimes people try to move away from violence and hatred, but they end up there just the same, as if it's simply hardwired into them. This is really a movie of villains. We just see different degrees of antisocial behavior. Another villain in this movie is excessive alcohol use. It actually plays a pretty important part in encouraging the characters to make bad decisions. Now moving to movie number 2. This is the 1998 war movie Saving Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg, and it starred Tom Hanks. Even though Matt Damon's character Private Ryan referred to P-51 Mustangs as tank busters, which they definitely were not, this is still a great film. Overall, this film was realistic, and like Unforgiven, it did not glorify combat. Rather, combat was accurately portrayed as brutal and unpredictable. What really stood out in this film from a mental health perspective was the effect of trauma. It really affected all the characters in different ways. I also liked the respect that the squad had for Captain Miller. We see this scene where he's holding a compass in his hand, and his hand is shaking, and they look at him, and they don't say anything. It was really scenes like that, scenes that were willing to explore these feelings, that made this movie great. And this takes me to movie number 1. This is the 1986 science fiction film Aliens, directed by James Cameron and starring Sigourney Weaver as Ripley. The film was technically a sequel of the 1979 sci-fi horror Alien, and even though it brought back Sigourney Weaver and of course the aliens, it didn't share a lot in common with the original. And I think that's one thing I liked about it. I wasn't actually a big fan of the 1979 film. One of the reasons I like this movie so much is because when I watch movies, I usually give advice to the characters, even though of course they never ask for the advice. I think this is one of the many reasons people don't like watching movies with me. So often in movies we see characters do things that don't make any sense. Now of course this happened in Aliens, but Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley had common sense. She understands what needs to be done. She does what the audience would do. She's there to wipe out the killer aliens, not bring them back in some effort to make money. She understands how dangerous they are from her lived experience, and she's not going to listen to people trying to rewrite her history or gaslight her. Her enemy is really the narcissism of the corporation, represented by Paul Reiser's character Carter Burke, and to some extent the inept Lieutenant Gorman. Yes, technically her enemies are the horrifically violent antisocial aliens that have acid for blood, but they're just going to do what space aliens do. No one expects them to be friendly or offer insightful solutions to complex social problems. They are essentially one-dimensional. It's the narcissism of some of the humans that jeopardizes everyone's life. This is really a battle against arrogance, self-centeredness, overconfidence, and a sense of entitlement. In addition to her battle against narcissism, this is also her battle with her own fears. She converts her fear into anger and her anger into action. She's not going to run and hide. she takes the fight to the aliens. Really just an excellent story on so many levels. So those are my favorite movies. I would love to hear your favorites, as well as the reasons that you may agree or disagree with my selections or my interpretations of these movies. Thank you once again for helping my channel reach 300,000. It's really been my pleasure to make these videos, and again, I hope that you find them to be interesting and helpful. I'll see you again soon.